Okay, looks like we're here. You could have made this easier for me, you know. Okay. Just hanging out. until people decide to join. Connect audio and possibly video to Discord. Okay. This is super organized. Just hanging out. This is what real organization looks like, gang. Waiting. Oh, we know this is a teacher's chat because there's 6 different accounts that all have Mr. and Mrs. Mr. Vogel's in there 3 times. It's like the world's most boring gaming stream. Watching white guy in chair. I guess that's all gaming streams. I'm hilarious. Just waiting for the signal to go. Going to turn this stream into Sam talks about how he feels old at only 30. All the things the kids do that I don't like. All the games I play that no one cares about anymore. How movies aren't as good as they used to be, and the music is just a bunch of noise. And kids drive way too fast. I have like a stick or something to shake when I talk about that, though. Yelling people get off my lawn. Yeah, that's all I'll do. Kids don't know DualShock controllers nowadays. It's all about the VRs and the motion capture. Why the heck do you need 8 different buttons on a controller? Sega Genesis only had 3, that's all you needed. Sonic the Hedgehog used all 3 of them. A jumped, B jumped, and C jumped. All you need is to jump. Van Halen had it right. That's my old man voice. This is what I do when I'm waiting. I'm entertaining myself. Yep. Hanging out. Looking cool. Meeting up the kids just outside school. Relaxing, chilling, feeling good. Kids are making trouble in my neighborhood. And I got one little fight. Mom got scared and said to move it into the end and Uncle in Bel Air. Apparently Computer Gaming World thought Motocross Madness 2 was Game of the Year racing. That's impressive to Motocross Madness 2. I tried Midtown Madness 1. I think I did. Chicago Edition. Designed for Windows 98. Ever want to get behind the wheel and race like a madman through the streets of a teeming metropolis? Well, here's your chance to careen your way through Chicago traffic that's thicker than a deep dish pizza. Forget everything you learned in driver's ed. Run every stop sign, drive the wrong way, and gun it to jump a drawbridge. No rules. Racing means do whatever it takes to win. So you guys out there that aren't quite on the West Coast, it's slightly later in the day. Granted, if you're in high school, you have to get up at crap o'clock in the morning anyway. So I feel you there. This has an actual manual. Oh, this is actually kind of cool. Midtown Madness has a multiplayer mode called Gold Rush. I wonder if there's like a expansion to the original Midtown Madness, because it says the Gold Rush is back, implying that it was once gone. Free for all, cops versus robbers and robbers versus robbers. It's like team mode, and I don't know what robbers versus robbers is. The scenario though, Fat Gold Bar sits unguarded somewhere in the city. Yeah, all you gotta do is get the gold to the bank or to your hideout without getting robbed yourself. If your greedy opponents ram you, the gold falls in the street for anyone to grab. Oh, that sounds kind of delightful. A Cadillac Eldorado touring coupe. Ford F-350 Super Duty. A Mustang police car. This is okay. They got some race cars and they got some silly city cars, and they have a Volkswagen Bug because, you know, it's 1998 and the new Beetle is the new Beetle. Include a map. This is... I should pay more attention to Midtown Madness. I think this runs okay in my machine. Man, that multiplayer mode sounds pretty sweet. I think I have Midtown Madness 3 on Xbox. I wonder if they kept some of that stuff. I think I was using the Xbox or something. It got 4 controller ports, so it's easier to play multiplayer with folks. But this is on Windows 98. Windows 98. That's where it's at. So if you want to talk about disappointment, because this is turning into the same talks about the PC games he has stacked next to his computer. Lands of Lore 3. Mixed bag so far. I mean, it's a first-person RPG on the PC, you know, a little bit. Kind of like Morrowind. Maybe more, kind of a mix of a Morrowind sort of thing, and Might and Magic, because you don't have quite the open world that you would in Morrowind, but you still have the first-person dungeon crawling stuff and the fairly permissive combat system. Not sure how stat progression works yet, but it renders on 3DFX, and that's cool if you have a Voodoo card. In addition, I mean, it's a multi-disc game that runs on Windows 98, which, you know, if you really like Windows 98, it's fun. Downsides, though, one, you gotta do a lot of disk swapping. Like, every area requires a disk swap. There's only 4 disks, which makes me wonder how big the game is. And also, there's some really weird design choices around some of the NPCs you interact with. Some really sexist stuff in there. Kind of uncomfortable to play. Yep. Still waiting on the dock. Could turn this into a live weight stream with Sam. Jokes and jokes and jokes and jokes. I still have to play Silver. Silver I could not get running on the Voodoo, which is sad because it looks cool. Isometric 3D RPG? Has an intuitive mouse interface that gives complete control in real-time combat. And you are making this complicated. Really, streamer archives. What the crap? Why is my stream restricted? Well, I can see it. Okay. Oh, so we have some viewers. I see 4 viewers. Howdy, 4 viewers. Maybe... Maybe it's due to the educational network. The school's trying to restrict me from talking about old video games while I wait for the stream to be ready. But at least Pracknote Zero can hear me, my lovely voice. Go, Josh. Go to Miss Johnson's room. How many people we got on? Yeah, 4. By the way, this is what's great about technology. Even as a programmer, nothing ever goes right the first time. That way we are all Mr. Vogel. I will change my name to Mr. Vogel. At this point, I'm just going to give witty remarks to whatever I read in the chat while I wait. See, this was cool about back in my day when I was in high school. Most places that ran schools didn't know anything about technology, so there wasn't a lot of filtering on the internet, which made it really easy to do stuff. Like I think some of the early filters for the internet would filter based off of the domain name. Hi, Luck HD. So I set the stream to public in hopes of making it more accessible. I don't know if we'll just get randos. I can always set back to private and we can see if it still works. What I was saying though is the old school network filtering systems would filter on the domain name of the website you went to. So if you put www.google.com in or something, it would check that against the filter and either allow you or deny you. But if you put the IP address, that wouldn't be blocked. So what us smart kids that knew a little bit about networking used to do is we would ping the network name of the website, get the IP address back, and then put that into the search browser. You can just get past any old filter. The days of bad software. We also played a lot of Doom. Like, Doom was an old game when I was in high school, but we played a lot of Doom. We couldn't install any software on the computers, so we just burned Doom to a CD, then everyone would stream the data off the CD, and it was such a small old game it didn't matter. I will join this call. Can I hear you, Doc? Yeah, I think I can hear you, Doc. Can you hear me? Oh, wait. I can hear you. Can you hear me? Well, I guess you can hear me over the stream, so I'm just going to use that. What am I doing? Yeah, there's going to be latency with this. I can hear you. I absolutely can. Sweet. Okay. Okay. So so I stopped hearing stuff, so I think I'm good to go. Feel free to text me if that's wrong. Anyway, so, hi guys, as I was so nicely introduced. I work in video games. I've done so probably for the past about 5 or 6 years. And I thought what I'd do is I'd start by just kind of talking about how I got to where I'm at in my career. A little bit to stroke my ego, but mostly to kind of give some context to what it takes to get into games. So, for me, it started out when I was in high school. I played a lot of video games, a lot of retro games, Sega Genesis, PC stuff. And I thought, you know what? I think I want to make games. So I started digging around on the internet and looking up things about, like, oh, what are the kind of roles that are in video games, programming, design, art. I started ordering books off Amazon and just reading anything I could find. And I took some beginning programming courses. I did like an HTML course in high school, and I tried teaching myself some stuff on my own to varying levels of success. And eventually, when it came to like senior year of high school, I started looking at what colleges can I attend that might further my career. And at that point, I wanted to try to focus what my studies were, because the thought process was, if I'm going to get a job in a competitive field like games, I need to make sure that I have a particular skill set that works well, a skill set that's desired, and that I know as much as possible, because you're always going to be at a disadvantage just coming out of school. You don't have any industry experience. And frankly, school will teach you how to learn. It will teach you the basics of gathering other skills that you might not have, but it's not going to actually give you 100% preparedness for the workforce, because, I mean, there's no substitute for experience. So I decided to focus in programming, because I did the HTML stuff, and I thought, I can program. So I went and found the cheapest program I could find, or the cheapest school I could find. And since I was in Ohio, that was kind of easy. So I went to a school in Appalachia, Ohio, called Shawnee State University, because they had just started a game program. It was a state university, so I could get discounts from being a citizen of the state. And it was also early enough that in the program's lifespan that the class sizes were small. So I knew that I could, sorry, I'm trying to think of the words. I knew that I could get a good rapport with my professors. It was easy for me to work with the community, with the students there, because like you're interacting with 8 other people, 10 other people in your class. You get to know them. You get to work on projects together. You're not having to deal with a 200-person auditorium where people might not know each other. And that gave me a boon where I happened to get lucky. The professors there were very adamant on teaching skills to understand how to program and how to learn the kind of where the rubber hits the road. Like, if I'm going to implement something in code, what are the details I need to think about? Actually learning how the programming language works, learning how to structure my programs so I can debug them. Because some computer science courses will teach more theory. They'll talk about how to estimate complexity of code or how to measure its performance, the theory of computer science, which is a whole topic of itself. But if you just have the theory and you've never implemented, then going and trying to write a program is really difficult for the first time. So I was lucky in that regard. And also, because it's so young in the program, you got out of it what you put into it. I would take initiative on my own to learn new skills, to try new projects, and to ask hard questions to try to further my career along. Because I knew that being in Ohio, there's no game industry in Ohio. If I was going to get a job, I'd have to move. And that also meant if I had to find a job in the first place, go through the interview process and get my resume out there, I couldn't go anyplace local. And no one around me would know how to do that. So part of that kind of self-motivation, pushing myself forward, was to research how do people find jobs in games. And I found a variety of sources, like how to make good business cards, the basics of social networking, going to an industry event or going to a party, and just making friends, introducing yourself, being a reasonable human being, with the understanding that I'm making friends with people that might in the future be able to call it, hey, there's a job opportunity over here, or hey, I know this guy, he's smart, let's bring him in, interview him, and see if he wants this job. As well as the Game Developers Conference, it's kind of the biggest industry conference in the game industry. It's a yearly thing that happens in San Francisco. I learned that thing existed, first of all, and also what means I would have to take to attend that conference, because there's a lot of job fair stuff going on. There's a lot of talks that go on there talking about how to work in the various fields of game development, what tools you need, the expectations of skills, and the challenges that are being faced by those projects. So then I went through and researched, okay, I'm going through doing my studies at school, and I also need to do this whole career thing. Let's get to GDC. They have a volunteer program. Great. Which, by the way, if you actually want to work in games, going through the volunteer program at the Game Developers Conference is a solid way to go. Chris did it. I've done it. And what it amounts to is you kind of like going to a con where you might like scan badges and fold papers and hand out t-shirts and stuff. You do like 20 hours of volunteer work. And then your entrance fee to the conference, which is like $2,000, is just waived. You get in for free. You just have to pay for travel and hotel. But then once you're there, you can attend tutorials, which teach things like, okay, here's some basic exercises for doing game design. Here's doing some writing exercises for structuring narratives in games. Here's overviews of different tools. You can go through various talks, as I said before, about current challenges in game development, like projects that have just shipped. What retrospective do they have? Like, what problems do they face? There's some social issues. Like, I know one big talk this past year was about unionization in the game industry, because nothing's perfect, and in games you can get overworked and underpaid. Talk about women's representation in games. Talking about the state of AI, a topic that's decades old, but its application is always shifting and changing for games. So you get this like wide spread of basic context and knowledge about the game industry, which as a student was freaking helpful, because I was an outsider looking in. The things I knew about games were what I read out of Nintendo Power and game magazines or reading on websites like IGN. I didn't know what it meant to make games, and this gave me some lens, which gives you an edge when you're later interviewing, because you can talk shop, you can talk like you know what you're doing. So I did that, where I did my studies and pushed myself to do projects that I had interest in, plus doing this whole Game Developers Conference thing. And then after I graduated, I landed a non-gaming job, which landing any job after college is really important. Firstly, because you need the work experience on your resume to be hireable. And secondly, you're going to have student loans to pay. So I got a job in an engineering company in the same town that I went to college in. And I did that for about a year. Did a lot of computer animation work. But I never stopped trying to get into games. I never stopped looking, building resumes, sending them out, networking with people. Eventually I got lucky one year at GDC. When I was doing the volunteer program, aside from being able to get in for free, which is great, there's other volunteers there. Sometimes they're looking for jobs. Sometimes they already work in the industry. And that gives you an opportunity just to have a conversation with them. And maybe you get lucky and hear about something, which is what happened to me. One of the guys I was working with was trying to start up his own game company in San Francisco. And I was in Ohio at the time, so there's a bit of difference in distance between the two. But he liked some of the work I was doing at this engineering company and asked if I could work remote. And I'm like, yeah, sure. So we wrote up a contract and worked it out with my current employer. And for about 4 months, I was working remote with this guy, Skyping with them every day, writing code, submitting it to our shared repository for where our source code was. And eventually they got enough funding where they offered me a full-time position to fly me out. And I'm like, sure, as long as you're paying me, I'm happy to leave Ohio. Left my old job, flew out to San Francisco, and I did that for about 8 months. And because it was a startup company in San Francisco, it eventually went belly up, because starting up a company is hard. But by then, I had met all the people that were on that startup company. The guy that ran the company, turns out, also was a really solid recruiter, so he gave me a lot of good tips about building resumes, how to conduct myself in interviews, and how to target the job application process. So now I'm sitting there looking for my next job, having some game industry experience, having a year of experience just at an engineering company, and I've got these other forces working with me to sell myself, essentially. And that worked out where I applied to ArenaNet, the guys that make Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2, up here in Seattle area. And that's what moved me up to Washington. And I did that for about 3.5 years. And at that point, that was kind of my first real big boy game job. So that was working with people who weren't just trying to start a game company and were young and hungry, but people who had shipped a game before, people who had expectations for how to support an existing game. Because Guild Wars being an MMO, it's really an online service that is continually maintained and needs to continue to monetize in order to fund the company. So it's different from trying to slap together a game and get it out. It's this thing's out, it needs to be stable and keep working. So there's a different problem set. So there's a lot of different lessons I learned there. And I got to a point with that job where okay, I understand how to work professionally in games now. Now I want to take that next step, or maybe now I work towards a promotion. I work towards being a more senior level individual. And I need to find the job that gives me those resources and that opportunity. And so that was what moved me to Wizards of the Coast for what I'm doing now, which is I'm no longer the entry-level programmer. I'm taking on responsibilities for other people. I'm owning entire features and trying to get those out to ship. And I guess kind of the lesson with that little piece is, as I realize as I go through and apply to these different jobs and try to figure out what I want to do in the industry, it's not just landing a job, it's meeting the expectations I need out of that job, whether it's a promotion or if you're entry level, working with an established enough company that they'll be around for a bit, and also being willing to take that risk with you and train you up to get more experience. So that's kind of the overview of me getting into games. As far as what I do specifically, as Chris said, I'm a server programmer. So that means is if you're working with an online game like an MMO or maybe a card-playing game like Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering Arena, the game I'm working on, there's two major components to that. You've got the game that runs on your local computer, your laptop or phone or home PC or whatever. And then you've got the part that the company's running that manages services like putting in your username and password and authenticating, managing chat between the people playing the game, in the case of Magic the Gathering Arena, running the rules of Magic. You submit that you want to play a card, and it has to figure out what happens to the game, whether you add mana to your mana pool, you did attack damage to a card, whatever. Or even doing matchmaking. Like, those all need to run somewhere. And so what companies will often do is they'll run some sort of a data center, like a warehouse of just high-performance machines that are all networked over a very high-speed network. And it will just run this software that's being talked to over the internet. And so my job is to write the applications that run in those, the things that your game client is talking to, and manage some of the network configuration for that. Like, how many of those programs do you have direct access to? How can we optimize the way you're talking over the network so you don't have latency or reduced latency? Which is, and you'll find that when you're getting into games, is there's these specializations that you end up kind of bending yourself into. Like I deal with a lot of network related problems and I guess what are called like back-end service problems, where you don't have like a pretty window that you see the way the program's running. You're relying on network messages and logs and things, these less sexy sort of pieces of information about what's happening in order to determine what's going on. You've got graphics programmers who are working on how do you make 3D graphics run as fast as possible on your machine. And they deal with things like driver support and operating system support for any random user's machine. Gameplay programmers who program the literal rules of how the game operates. For an example, like if you're running an RPG, programming up how the inventory system works, programming out how the progression system works, adding more strength, adding more speed, leveling up. All those little pieces are done by a gameplay programmer, or maybe several subsections of gameplay programming. Audio programming, handling how do we compress audio so we can ship it on a disc or download it really fast. How do we play it in a very clean way? How do we synchronize audio with animation? And you've also got technical artists who do a lot of tools development for artists, and regular tools programmers who build like map editors and content editors for designers. Like there's a whole wide spectrum of engineering in games. It depends a little bit on what you want, a little bit of what experience you have, and what the company needs. So hopefully that provides some context to how I got to where I'm at and what I do. Probably at this point, I'm happy to open up to questions. So I would say either, Chris, if the room's empty, you can ask a question, or if the students have a question, obviously I'm more than happy to answer. So I heard the audio come in briefly and leave again. It's a little quiet, so I'd say speak up. I didn't quite hear that question. If you could speak up. I see someone's typing. Maybe we'll get a text version of the question. How many people work on one game? Sure. Okay, so how many people work on one game? That highly depends on a lot of variables. Sure. Sorry, I'm also getting the audio feed. Okay, so firstly, in order to keep order with this, I would say let's leave repeating questions into the chat, so that way I don't have to read the chat and listen to the audio and try to deduce what actually came first, because time is hard when you have latency. But I heard the question about how many different fields do we have working in games, and also kind of the more general version, how many people. So I'll go to both of those. As far as fields go, a little bit of that depends on, like, a lot of this is going to depend on the company and the game itself, because different size companies are going to have different targets as far as how much money are they willing to invest in the game, which leads to marketing and polish. And also, what are the skill sets of the people you have on hand? So as far as different disciplines go, you've got the basic main veins. You've got art, which is going to deal with building UI, like buttons, banners that go over the game, maybe background images. You've got in-game assets, which depending on the game could be 2D, something done in Photoshop or Sprite Editor, or 3D, something done in Maya or 3D Studio Max. You've got art done for marketing materials, graphic design, web design, art. It spans a lot depending on the kind of product you're making. So you can see where there's sub-disciplines within that main track. You've got design. These are the guys that are thinking about what kind of rules should the game run in order to be fun. Like if you're thinking about checkers, there's a difference between the implementation of the rules and the rules themselves. The rules are something you can read on a piece of paper and it tells you, you should move your piece like this. You are able to skip over pieces and hop and capture multiple pieces if this particular situation presents itself. And then the implementation of the rules is the actual physical pieces on the board and the square board and the sizing of the pieces to fit within the square. So design works on the definition of the rules, not the implementation. You've got programming, which is a lot of what I'm in, which is very implementation oriented. It's, okay, you've got these rules for how the game should run. We have these assets that are how the game should look, whether it's sprites, 3D models, UI. And the programmer's job is to build automation within the computer to make that all come together and display in a cohesive way. Make sound play at the right time, so when you click a thing, it makes a doink-a-doink sound. When you take damage in a game, the screen goes red to tell you that that happened, and your numbers go down. You've also got audio, which deals with a combination of audio, like literal audio, like recorded data that's being streamed through, like sound effects, music, voice, and also the engineering half of that, which is how do we build a pipeline to get like your recorded audio from raw file, maybe if we were really old, on a tape, or maybe just a recorded asset that's sitting on someone's machine, compressed and cut up and ultimately put into the game in a way that it can understand. And that kind of covers building the game. And then you've also got all the business stuff around that, because you've got your senior leadership in the business end to worry about financing the company, getting investment. You've got lawyers involved if you want to worry about copywriting a name. If you want to worry, you need lawyers to build contracts with third parties. Like if I was going to sell a game on Xbox, you need to make a contract with Microsoft to say, okay, we've got this game, we want to ship it on your platform. We need to get development kits from you because they have special boxes that you use when you make Xbox games, and you have to make sure it works on that. And so you have to, there's exchange of money between the businesses to get the rights to do that. And there's restrictions on how you can store that. And then you've also got testing, which is, time's getting short here. Sure, sorry. I'm getting a little long-winded. But you've got testing also, which then covers, I'm making the game, I've done this small piece, we need to make sure it works the way we expect. So as far as the number of people, that highly depends on the company in the game. If I was making a small mobile game, I might have 15 people, and people would take up a lot of those different roles and kind of do multiple things because you're trying to keep your budget down and you're trying to get a game out within 6 months. If you're working on a much bigger game like Uncharted or Gears of War or Horizon Zero or something, you might have hundreds of people because you have more money to invest in trying to polish it and make a bigger, shinier product. Okay, so next question I see. What language is most common in game industry? Okay, so I assume you're asking about programming language. Like most things in life, there are subtleties and it depends. So I started out at ArenaNet, I did C++. At Wizards, I do a lot of C#. What language you pick, there's not ever really one language. It depends on the problem you're trying to solve. Different languages have different caveats. Like C and C++ give you access to the bare metal if you need it, while still providing some high-level constructs, right? You can make classes and structures and functions. You're not writing assembly. But if you wanted to, you could see, like, what is at this memory address? I want to inline some assembly to do something insane. You have that power. You have full control of the system. But it also can make code more complicated, and depending on how you've written the code, maybe it's not as easy to get it from your computer over to another platform. Now, something like C#, or if you've used Java, there's some similarities there in how they're structured. It's a different style of building your application. It's doing, for instance, the big difference between the two is how it manages memory. And C++, you're really doing it all yourself. You allocate memory, you delete memory. So if you forget to do one of those two things, you're in trouble. On the other hand, if you're worrying about something like C#, it has garbage collection. You allocate, and then as long as you lose all your references, it will magically go away, which sounds great, but there's always caveats. Maybe you are thrashing the garbage collector and it runs slow. I'm digressing, but point is, I can tell you what languages I've worked with and why we use them for our particular projects. The best thing I would say is if you're looking to figure out what languages should I learn in order to help me get into the game industry, C++ is always a good start because there's a lot of general theory about object orientation, memory management that bleed into other languages and work well. And you can always build off of that. Otherwise, it's a lot of looking at what is the company looking for. Like if you were to do a job application, oftentimes they cite what languages they're looking for. And so you could target towards that if you're targeting towards a specific company. Or, honestly, you should be learning different languages too. I've told Chris on a number of occasions, I hold no sympathy for a programmer that says they can't get something done because he doesn't know the language. Like, you get to a certain point in experience where you've learned a couple languages and you kind of see what's going on. You should be able to take a book in a weekend and basically understand how it works and be able to write code. It might not be the most efficient code, because that's something that will take time, but your primary restriction as a programmer shouldn't be that you don't know the language. Okay, time to wrap up. I'm going to answer this one last question because I'm selfish. From conception to release of the game, how long should it take the process? For a mobile game, 6 months. For a AAA game, 2 to 4 years. For an MMO, 8 years. Depends on all the previous caveats I said. Okay. So, I'm going to put into the chat my email. Boop. So, feel free to email me if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to answer. Hey, no problem, Mr. Vogel. One of the Mr. Vogels. Obviously, if you have questions about engineering stuff or code review or that sort of thing, feel free to ask that as well in addition to actual industry questions. Yeah, no problem, guys. It's been lovely. Sorry for the technical hitches and the short time frame. So, this looks like it's the end. I'm going to wish you adieu. Be well, guys. Enjoy being in school. I'm going to enjoy not being in school. Cheers.